All right, everybody. We're lucky to have Patrick Flanagan here from Arctic Wolf, giving us the state of cybersecurity to scare everybody into submission. So we're ready to kick it off. Without further ado, Patrick, let's
awesome.
Take it away.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom. Thanks for the entire marathon team for hosting this, bringing in lunch, bringing you all here together. Really appreciate that. That's fantastic. Marathon's a great partner for us. And really what I wanted to do with this session is talk about what we're seeing in the field from a cybersecurity perspective. So just for a brief introduction of myself, I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering for the Mid-Atlantic here at Arctic Wolf. So I have coverage from here in Virginia up through Jersey outside of New York City. So I cover the Mid-Atlantic region. So I see and I talk to a lot of different customers. I see a lot of things that are thrown at our sales teams, things that customers are concerned about. And I want to have this be an open and interactive discussion. So if there's anything that catches your eye or your attention, questions that you have as we walk through some of the stuff that we're seeing, please, by all means, feel free to chime in, interrupt. I want this to be interactive and less of a death by PowerPoint. So I don't have too many slides, maybe about 15 to walk through, but I want to maybe dive a little bit deeper on some of the stuff that pops up, just because it's very relevant to what's going on out there in the cybersecurity world. So the goal for this presentation about the state of cybersecurity in 2025 is really to create a snapshot of like where we are, what are we seeing, what's happening out there, what are the things that you as cybersecurity practitioners need to know in order to make intelligent decisions for your organization, for your environment, and the applications, the users that you have to cover. So this is a simple goal, but at the same time, you have to look in a lot of different places in order to get the right data, because what I see is fairly broad, right? I'm looking at the Mid-Atlantic, our customer base here, customers of a certain size, but at the same time, there's a whole world out there of attacks, of defenses, of things people are doing, things attackers are trying, from your home, right? People are trying to get into your home computer if it's out there. People try to get into the government, Fortune 500 companies, you name it, right? What's going on? We're going to talk about that today. But we also want to learn from what's worked, what hasn't worked in the past. We want to be able to justify the investments that you've made already in cybersecurity and some of the practices that you're implementing in your organization, making sure that they're keeping up with what's going on out there. We want to be able to predict the future, right? Like be ready for what's coming next, because it's one thing to prepare for the last war, right? But you have to always be preparing for that next war, right? From a strategic perspective. So what is that next war going to look like from a cybersecurity angle? And then understand what you're doing. Is this a best practice? Is this something that is stacking up with compliance goals, with what the industries are looking to do? And just make sure that you're not falling behind, right? You're not the sitting duck. You're not the low-hanging fruit out there for cyber attackers to go and get. So that's kind of a frame up of what we're trying to do with this presentation, is to get you ready for all of these things and to make sure that you're kind of aware of what's out there. And the way that we got this data is not just from, hey, here's what I'm seeing and let's kind of talk about it. We did a scientific survey of over 1,000 security and IT professionals across the world, right? Just to figure out what's going on, get their firsthand perspectives. And we looked at owners, directors, vice presidents, C-level executives, things that they're thinking about from a high-level perspective. What matters to the business? What matters to making sure cybersecurity is aligned to the goals of the business, right? Because we can kind of fall into the trap sometimes as practitioners where you want to be ultra secure, you want to have everything out there, but you don't want that to come at the cost of doing business, right? Or users being able to use their applications, get their jobs done at the end of the day. So there's always that balance, right? Of good enough security, good enough performance. How do you marry those two and get to where you want to be, which is ultimately be a productive business that makes a profit, right? So how do we get there? So once we got these results, we wanted to compile what those themes were. Like, what are we seeing from a macro trend perspective that's going to help us share this information in a useful way with people like you that are interested in learning more about this topic. And this is from the globe, right? This is everybody. So incident response planning, a lot of companies have implemented incident response plans. So maybe just a quick show of hands on this. How many of you have incident response plans already set up for your orgs? So most of you have that already. That's good. That's a good practice, right? Because when those stressful situations come, there's a breach, there's something ongoing, it's happening now. It's very easy, without that plan in place to, have everybody start running around like chickens with their heads cut off. You don't know who does what, you don't know who has what responsibilities, you don't know who to call. We talk to a lot of customers who, maybe don't have these incident response plans in place, and they're just looking for help. They're looking for like, okay, what do I do? And having that plan in place where you have, roles and responsibilities, you have timelines, you have processes set up that are organized, it helps you say, okay, it's happening. We understood that this was a possibility, and here's kind of our playbook to run that is going to help us get through this with the least damage possible. Ransomware is obviously big and getting bigger, right? And an unfortunate reason for this is that ransoms ultimately get paid, right? There is a profit that these attackers can make by putting ransomware out and extorting money from people, right? They wouldn't do it if it didn't work. So, it kind of is what it is. We do a lot of business with, we talk to like cyber insurance brokers and others who actually are negotiating directly with these ransomware attackers. And they're actually full-time positions. And I think, Jalen, correct me if I'm wrong, we actually have some people like this at Arctic Wolf who are full-time negotiators with ransomware groups. Like that is their full-time job. Can you believe it? I mean, it's crazy. So this is like a legit industry at this point, ransomware. So you got to be thinking about that and say, okay, this is something that people are going to come after us for. What are we going to do to help stop it?
Well, nobody pays, right?
Yeah.
Just first time to pay.
That would be one way. But who's going to be the first? That's always the problem, right? That's the unfortunate thing about it. It's like, well, I can get through this if I pay, so I'll pay. And then kind of the broader, it's like the tragedy of the commons in some ways. So responses, acknowledged endpoint tool. So endpoint obviously has been around for a while. I will talk a little bit about what Arctic Wolf is doing from an endpoint perspective, because for a long period of time, Arctic Wolf is focused on, the MDR, managed detection and response, where we're, that SOC for you, we're the eyes and ears on your environment. We're making sure that if there's an incident that's going on, we can spot it quickly, we can remediate it quickly, we can get in touch with you quickly, and ultimately limit the scope of the damage that happens from these attacks. But endpoint's a big component of that. Like we suck in telemetry from pretty much any endpoint solution out there. We've recently added our own endpoint protection along with that, so you can kind of have everything under one shop with Arctic Wolf. And staffing shortages. This is sort of an interesting, and I have a slide on this. A couple years ago, maybe in 2021, 2022, it was actually really hard to find cybersecurity professionals, right? There was a kind of a mad rush to grab any available talent. Just given macro conditions in the economy and the market, that's shifted a little bit. But at the same time, you still want to have highly competent, highly professional people who are managing your environment and not, cause a risk to the business because it's difficult to staff up. So data breaches. So can you believe this? 48%, almost half of all organizations that we surveyed, this is kind of a big sample size, right? 1,000. 48% of those, and this is not just Arctic Wolf customers, right? This is across the board, everybody. 48% of organizations identified a breach in the last 12 months. Now, I don't know what the number would be if they didn't realize they got breached, because that probably accounts for some of them. But 48% of organizations identified a breach in the last 12 months. That is a crazy stat, in my opinion.
Would that be unauthorized access? I mean, kind of what's the...
Yeah, so I have a pie chart of exactly what those breaches are. Like some of them's like business email compromise.
Okay.
Some of them are actually they have remote access into the environment. Sometimes there's malware, phishing, stuff like that. Okay. So I've got a pie chart to break that down actually right here. Well, actually that's not a pie chart. That's not the one of what they actually were, but you can see that yes, 48%. No, we believe an undetected breach may have occurred, 8%. No, we're unsure if a breach may have occurred, 9%, and then we're confident that no breach has occurred, 35%. So you can see this is a big deal, right? If you're not protecting your organization, then you really need to start thinking about doing that soon. Build that out here. All right, so 96% of the customers that we surveyed, of that 48%, 96% of those, so 46% or 45 or whatever that is, disclosed some aspect of the breach, whether that was publicly or privately, like disclosing it to some of the partners that were helping, or to impacted third parties, right? Like, you get those notices in the mail. I probably get one of these at least once a week, right? Like the data breach notifications in the mail from some vendor I've used in the past. You get it. I probably have like at least 100 years worth of free identity protection if you add it all up, right? From all this stuff, it's crazy. But this is a big deal because no company wants to be in the news, right? About having a data breach, having that loss of trust. I mean, unfortunately, it's become a little bit more expected as of late, just because it happens so often. But at the same time, it's never a good news cycle when you're in there because you got breached. It causes a lack of trust and just makes things kind of a hairy situation for everybody. So additionally, ransomware I mentioned, is already becoming a increasingly dangerous threat, but 45% of these organizations suffered a ransomware attack in the last 12 months. An additional 2% claim to be unsure if they're victims. I'm not quite sure how you'd be unsure if you got ransomware or not, but there it is. And 91% of those included data exfiltration. So it's not just that they're locking up your stuff and not letting you access it. They're actually taking it somewhere else, and God only knows what's happening to it, right? Like they could be selling it, they could be putting it on the dark web, they could be doing anything with it. Once it's out there, unfortunately, it's out there, and there's really nothing you can do to put that toothpaste back in the tube. So the best thing to do is to try to make sure that that data never leaves your control. 57% part of the ransom demand was to prevent the release of the exfiltrated data, right? So it's not just they're encrypting your files so you can't do business. It's basically like extortion. Like, we are going to release this unless you pay us off. These are bad people, right? But unfortunately, so there's a lot of smart people in the world, right? There's 8 billion people in the world. And unfortunately, a lot of them are super smart, but don't have the opportunities that we have, in the United States, maybe go and do this professionally, right? So the way that they can make money off of their skills is to do this, to join these ransomware. So we were dealing with some of the most intelligent people in the world trying to get after us. And we have to, understand that, accept it. Part of this like cyber war, which is really what we're in, is a cyber war, is understanding that our enemies are very talented, our enemies have a lot of time on their hands, our enemies are going to try to do whatever they have to do to get away with it and get away with your money, get away with shutting down your business, causing chaos, what have you. This is a real threat. So 29%, yes, but the attack group did not discuss exfiltrated data. This is more so they just wanted to get paid off because they wanted to unlock your data. 9%, we did not identify data exfiltrated, and then no, because we were able to prevent the exfiltration of data. So, bad that you suffered a ransomware attack, but I guess, 5% good because you were able to prevent some of the data from going out there. And if you have like solid DLP tools in place, that can help with something like this. So quick show of hands, has anyone had a ransomware incident over the past year or so? Hopefully not. Fantastic. So I'm glad you're not part of the 45% there. All right, let's just go ahead and build this whole thing out. So obviously ransomware, it's not just the only cost to actually have to pay people off, right? There is a real cost to the business going down because of this. And a lot of times this can be days or even weeks, sometimes stretching into months, depending on what happened here. And 40% of those experience a period of total work stoppage. 94 some sort of downtime, whether that's an application, whether that's a few users being affected. But 40% of these total work stoppage, complete loss of productivity. That means going to zero on the business, and that is bad, as everybody knows. 4 months to more than a year. So this is not necessarily just like a one-time, we're down for a couple hours, get it back up. 50%, 4 months, it's more than a year. So I know these are some of the scare slides that we talked about up front, but this is what we're seeing, right? This is coming directly from the stats. This is coming directly from the survey. So, net lesson on some of this stuff is be thinking about ransomware, be thinking about breaches, because they can and do happen quite a bit. So why, though? Like, why is this happening? How do we prepare? So I mentioned this a second ago, but 83% paid the ransom. That's why it's happening, ultimately, because it's a profitable opportunity for these groups to go out and do it. Paid by insurance, 30%. Paid by their organization, 53%. And then people who didn't pay, 18%. Now, I'm not sure what the people who didn't pay actually did about it, but
So we worked with 3 different companies that I can think of that got hit in different ways. They were all down, and none of them paid.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did is rebuild their whole environment, and some were able to do it within 48 hours. And
Wow.
I can think of one that was months to get back kind of to where they were before. So that's just the ones I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, good for the people who could get it back up in 48 hours. Is that like a is that disaster recovery kind of a situation?
They just kind of had it, they just rebuilt all the servers and had backups and just spun everything back up and just do manpower at it, so.
Yeah. I mean, that's one option, right? That's, in a lot of ways, like people, the CFO will pull up a spreadsheet and he'll be like, all right, it's gonna cost us this much to do that.
Yeah.
Or it'll cost us this much to pay the ransom off. And as you can see in most cases, it's probably cheaper to pay the ransom off than it is to actually try to go through it and do it yourself, unfortunately.
Do you think that is, I'm really surprised at kind of the openness to your survey questions by the executive and C-suite people. And I'm curious if you think that some of that openness is that these organizations are just accepting that this is going to be baked into the cost of doing business.
Yeah, it's a good question. And these surveys are anonymous, so you don't have to like say, I was breached and I'm the CFO or CEO, whatever. Right. Like this is more so to kind of get where we are so that we can build better tools to help and build better services to help. Because ultimately this is the reason we want to collect this data is to number one, educate the market on what's going on. Number two, to help build, better protections, better best practices around like the actual state of what's happening in the field, and just, have that holistic view of stuff. So the survey participants, thankfully they, can be honest, they're more or less an anonymous forum like this. But yeah, I mean, this makes a big difference to the C-suite of businesses because they got to account for all this stuff. Whether it's investing in cybersecurity or just accepting that, hey, we got some amount of risk and we're going to self-insure.
I'm surprised how many people pay to trust that amount of money. They're going to do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that people.
It's an honest living.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm surprised people can pay and negotiate and it can't be tracked by law.
Yeah.
Like what?
It is crazy. And usually the way that these ransoms are paid out are usually with like cryptocurrency and some other methods, and they're usually overseas. So it's, hard to track down, like let's say they're sitting in Russia or something like that. I mean, I guess we could, in theory, send the Navy SEALs in there to go get them, but, they're not going to create an international incident over, a couple $1 million. So it kind of is what it is.
Do you know, is this trend, do you know what the trend is on this particular metric? Like, is paying increasing or is paying?
Yeah, paying is actually increasing, right? And it's because, it's funny to even say this, but there is a little bit of honor amongst thieves, right? Like people realize that, okay, because nobody would pay if they didn't actually let the data go, right? So there's kind of this, the attackers realize that they have to be, quote unquote, honest in order to make it.
By their word.
Yeah, so the reason that it's going up is for that exact reason. It's like, okay, well, if we pay, we will get it back because, otherwise nobody would pay these guys.
And is cyber insurance taking that into consideration a lot more because they're dealing with this, they're negotiating, they know this is a way of business?
100%. Yeah, and you can, in your cyber insurance policy, you work with your brokers to kind of build that out. You can actually get coverage to pay ransoms. Obviously there's like deductibles involved and things like that, but 30% of the ransomware payments are are made by insurance companies. And it's almost, you could kind of compare it, like you see the billboards for lawyers on the side of the highway, right? Like they have deals with insurance companies because they work with them all the time to kind of negotiate these rates that they can use to pay off their clients. It's the same thing with the cyber insurance companies and the ransomware groups. Like they kind of have these informal working relationships where like, they can sort of trust that the ransomware group is going to let the stuff go and they can kind of negotiate some rates with them. I mean, it's a dirty business, but it is what it is.
Reality.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so what are we doing to protect from some of this stuff? Because, obviously I could talk all day about how many attacks are out there and what you should be afraid of, but really the point of this presentation is to talk about like what we can do about it. And these are some of the tools that the survey respondents are using in order to decrease the amount of ransomware events that happen. So obviously endpoint is huge, right? You want to have something on each device that's protecting from malware that can kind of sense some bad stuff going on from a device level. So you can see that 100% of organizations are using some sort of next-gen endpoint tool. If you go down the list, you can kind of see in decreasing order of things that people are using. Requiring multi-factor authentication is a big one. I would say most companies have some sort of multi-factor authentication, but maybe it's not deployed like to every application, and there's still some gaps in the MFA environment there. A SIEM is a big one, but obviously if you're running this, you have to be an organization of like a certain size and technical competence level to be able to run it, because this is not an easy thing to monitor and manage. You have to go and set up all of your devices to send information to the SIEM, and then you have to have engineers to manage it, to track it, to monitor the alerts, to be on call if something does happen, to know what to do if something does happen, and then how to correlate all that information together. And this is something that bigger companies do. They'll usually have some sort of SIEM in place, but for Arctic Wolf customers, usually what we're trying to do is help customers that maybe aren't mature enough to run their own SOC, to run their own SIEM. We do that for them on the back end. We kind of check and correlate events that as they come in, and then we can help them respond to it far quicker than maybe they could on their own. Then just kind of going down the list, identity and access management, that's big. Make sure that whoever's logging in is who they say they are, whether that's through, we use a lot of fingerprint verification on our applications at Arctic Wolf. Just some sort of identity verification to make sure that, it's not somebody pretending to be one of your employees that's actually logging in there. Network traffic analysis, that sort of ties in with this on the SIEM side, but just making sure that there's no anomalous traffic patterns coming in, looking at network activity to make sure that users aren't going to places that they should not be going within the network. So what we see is, in addition to analyzing the traffic, is implementing trust technology in there to make sure that people go and get to what they should be able to get to.
You mentioned at the beginning that one of the surprising things is the kind of acceptance that, hey, we're going to be short-staffed, and kind of baking that in as well. Do you see an increase in third-party SIEM management, like with you guys, or 360 IT or something like that, like a IT as service managed for companies that are maybe a little bit smaller and are dealing with that shortage of personnel?
Yeah, there's a lot of MDR, managed detection and response type companies that do monitoring as a service or security as a service for their clients. I would say that the cutoff threshold is usually, I don't know, like kind of once companies get above like 2,000, 3,000 users and employees on the back end, that's when they usually have staff on hand that can build out a SIEM that has that expertise. They have kind of the economies of scale within their org to do that in-house. But under that, from to your question on how do people staff that up? Yeah, I mean there's a lot of managed cybersecurity vendors like us and several others that specialize in this, and I would say most companies have some sort of solution like that. If they can't do it themselves. Did that answer your question, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I talked a little bit about endpoint. So 66% are currently using one or more next generation endpoint security tools. 87% are using 2 or more tools, right? So there's a lot of stuff out there from, this is endpoint protection, endpoint detection and response, extended detection and response. So these are all things that kind of use some of that machine learning, some of the AI stuff that's come out recently to help correlate, identify threats that may not be obvious on the surface, right? There's a lot of things that computers can detect just based on pattern recognition and things like that that humans may not be able to do. So getting like a next generation endpoint tool is important just because not everything's going to have a signature, right? Like there are, Arctic Wolf has actually caught some 0 days, right? Just based on the behavior of what these applications or what these devices are doing. They've been infected by malware that's never been seen in the wild before, so there's no signature for it, like in any of the databases out there. But we've seen it doing some anomalous things, like on the network. And so we've actually caught that. We've got some case studies about some of these 0 days that we've caught. There's one maybe a couple months ago that was I thought was an interesting story that we saw like a device starting to talk to a bunch of different servers like in a very repetitive kind of way. It was sending out some interesting data never been seen before, but we caught it and we were able to shut it down. And then we started seeing it like in other organizations. So we were able to kind of stop it before it hit anybody else after we saw it for the first time. So having those economies of scale to be able to see things across the board. We have 6,500 or so customers. So when we're looking at that amount of data, there's a lot of things that we can do to try to correlate and make sure that if something happens over here to this customer, it's not going to happen to these 50 other customers that have similar environments over here. So that economy of scale really helps with that. So skill shortage. So I mentioned that just due to the economy, this has changed a little bit over the past couple of years. But in 2023, early 2024, 64% felt hiring and recruiting of security staff was a primary area of concern, and now that's down to 16%. So people have, or organizations, I think, have decided that now they can find people to do this. To manage. Is there a talent surge? Does this have to do with just general macroeconomic factors? Is it because we just accepted that maybe we can't do this ourselves, right? It's just maybe we've given up and stopped looking for people, or are they implementing alternatives, right? Is there something else that we can do instead of trying to hire 5 people to manage this stuff? Is there a way that we can become more effective at this? So from a top of mind perspective, again, this is a survey of like the C-levels, directors of these organizations. Just this has gone from super top of mind kind of down to less top of mind. And I'm curious to kind of get the room's take on this statistic. If this is something you've seen or experienced, or any comments on it?
Yeah, definitely accepting the skill shortage and just baking that into the overall cost of the product. That's been our perspective, is that it's just the talent is not to be had, and even if it is, we couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
At that scale.
Yep, exactly. I think that's a common theme from customers that I talk to anyway. It's just like, all right, we kind of have what we have. Let's figure out a way to make the best of it and to do everything we can with the resources that we've got.
I think the junior talent is coming though too, based on job fairs and college fairs that we go to, seeing a lot of people studying cybersecurity, and that takes years to kind of come around, but
yeah,
these new programs are starting to churn out grads, and you're having a lot more of that talent coming out. Maybe not experienced and been through it, but certainly are trained up and ready to go.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do a decent amount of conferences, like at educational events and fairs like that. It's always cool to kind of see the college students come up and talk to us and just kind of want to know about what we're seeing, what cybersecurity is like as a career field. And we get to talking about things like, hey, what got you into cybersecurity? And I would say the most common answer to that is like, hey, I'm a computer nerd. I like computers. I think it's interesting to kind of try to break into things and see how people are trying to break in there. And, those conversations are kind of fun because these people are doing it for the right reason, right? They think it's interesting, they think it's fun, they want to do it professionally because they, their minds, and I just remember like, when I was coming out of college, I kind of felt the same way. I was like, all right, this is kind of an interesting field. Like people are trying to get in, how do we stop them? Kind of like the cops of, the cyber world. And Arctic Wolf even has like the program. We got tons of young guys right out of college that are working for us in our SOC, right?
Like we work with Avid. I don't know if Avid's out here in Virginia, but I spoke to an Avid class, and one of the students in the class was going to college for cybersecurity. Yeah. And I was shocked because when I was coming out of college or high school, that for sure wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Back in 2017 when I graduated high school. So.
Yeah. And it's definitely ramped up in recent years, just because this is a big deal when you're hearing about it every day in the news. Like, what do you?
So I know personally for me, my daughter is in the cybersecurity program at OU right now, and her biggest factor in deciding to go join that program wasn't playing the cops or anything. It was, hey, this is where the money is, and try to work with. And so we have a lot of interns that come through our organization, usually through like the CSIP program. It's a Virginia STEM internship program, and we have a lot that come through the organization and leave to get, go make some real money working for the government or working for like you guys or things like that. So that's a challenge for us because we can't match that.
Yeah.
What I mean, as a small organization, that's where we have to be more reliant on those automated systems and third-party systems.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, that is a reality, right? People get into it for the money, and they're just going to go where the paycheck is. So that's something that as a business leader, right, that people I think are recognizing, like you're recognizing. It's like how do we make do with the resources that are available to us? How do we kind of build our fortress with the materials that we have available? That's really what it's about. So as far as like incident readiness and response, we talked about this briefly earlier. So most organizations, thankfully, including most of the people here, have a formal IR plan. So I do wonder how many have an active retainer. So you know who you're going to call. You have kind of somebody on speed dial when this happens. Okay, so that might be something to think about. Just to have those go-to people. You know exactly kind of who to call to help you out to actually clean up the mess to get things back in working order as quickly as possible. Like if you need to have a negotiator who's talked to these ransomware groups before, you probably want to have a retainer just because they're going to know how to get these deals done for better or for worse. But preparedness, you always want to be prepared, right? It's something that's necessary. But 70%, can you believe it? 70%. So of the 64 that have actually purchased the IR retainers, 70% have used it in the last 12 months. So that means they've had something happen where they've had to, kind of use the bat phone to call these people and get them to help. So this is a pretty scary stat, actually. And then 30% of these have used it multiple times. So they've had multiple incidents. So again, like not a great stat, but it just kind of shows what's going on out there. And I've got some, by the way, there's like a link in here. So I've got this deck. I've got a lot of materials and stuff that we'll give to you after the presentation, just so you can have it for reference. If you're interested in diving deeper on any of this stuff, we got tons of white papers and information, fact sheets, all of that good stuff. So I do want to talk about AI because AI is, as we all know, the biggest buzzword going around in tech right now. So how do we balance like being able to use AI to help the business and to help us, make more money ultimately, and also use it in a way that's not going to hurt us and cause massive cybersecurity incidents. Like I remember when ChatGPT first came out a couple of years ago, everybody started to use it. And even some of my coworkers at the time, this was not at Arctic Wolf, but they would go in and say, hey, here's like 5 bullet points that I want to send an email to somebody, can you rewrite this to like sound good, right? And so they would use ChatGPT to kind of help edit their emails and stuff like that, but not really realizing that they were putting a bunch of sensitive corporate data into ChatGPT to like rewrite, right? So now that that data is off on the OpenAI servers somewhere, you don't have control over it anymore. And companies quickly realized this, right? They were realizing that people were using AI quite a bit, even if they weren't supposed to, right? This was kind of like a shadow IT problem creeping in. And really, it could bite people depending on what like AI service you're using. Like you don't know what happens to that data. So obviously, most organizations are going to use AI or want to use AI in some way. I think that there's a lot of, and even still, there's a lot of like questions like, okay, how exactly is this going to help our business? Like, how are we going to use this? Like, what kind of benefits are we going to get from AI? I think a lot like of the broader industry stuff is still getting worked out. Like we're still trying to figure out what applications to build with AI that are actually going to move the needle for the business. I think it's already there in some areas like software development for sure. Like if you're a coder hobbyist like I am, it's very useful to be able to go in and help it debug your code, or if you're not sure how to do something, you can go in there and get AI to help you. Other applications, not as great, but still pretty good. Like if you want to create some text or just create some stuff, ask it some questions. But only 49% of these 94 have developed and implemented policies that outline the proper usage of LLMs and generative AI. So I know at Arctic Wolf we have developed this, like for our internal users, like we have to like click on agree to like the AI policies when we go and use it. Not sure if all of you have developed stuff like that, but from a training perspective, I think that employees should know like what they can and what they can't do with AI. Because if they don't know that, they're just going to default to using it for everything, just assuming that it's safe, even if it may not be. And then 34% of this 94% have said no, don't do it at all. You can't use it. We're going to block it. It's just we don't know what we don't know at this point. So just don't even go there. So you can kind of see, right now it's a little bit of a frothy situation with LLMs, with AI. But I am curious to get your feedback on this. If you're using AI today, or kind of what you're using it for, if there's anything interesting that you've seen with it.
We're definitely been dipping our toes in the past month or so, and it's going to be ramped up significantly in the next 3 to 6 months, which we're stat there about the LLMs and generative AI. I've been working with our lawyer for about a month now to try and get that across the finish line. So we're encountering all of these fun issues currently.
Yeah, like what are you going to be using it for?
Basically, collection of data from multiple sources that are out there publicly available to the maritime industry, kind of collating it most likely probably into a SQL database, and then using a orchestrator bot AI to collect all the other bot AIs who are going out and collect all this information, and then putting it in a fashion that actually benefits our business so we can plan for the future.
Yeah. That's interesting. I love hearing those use cases just because people are very creative when it comes to using this. I think that's a great use case, right? Just kind of taking these like oceans of data and trying to make sense of it, and then kind of correlating all that stuff out there. So it's very cool. And we're kind of still in the early days of this. So like the data security, data privacy aspects of this, like how do you prevent data exfiltration when you're using AI, right? Or how do you prevent how do you prevent misuse of it? So it's all very interesting here, but some things you can do with AI, like, and these are things that I've seen before. You can actually set up policies where you can send certain data to AI, but like if it sees like DLP protected type data, then it'll just kind of block it from going. You can also only choose like maybe you want them to use ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, and then the rest of them block. So there's a lot of different things you can do to protect yourselves from a configuration and policy perspective on this, but this is definitely kind of continuing to be shaped at this moment, just because it's relatively new. All right, so takeaways from the survey. So data breaches, there's no signs of slowing down. I doubt that this will ever slow down, at least from an attempt perspective. I hope that we will continue to get better at defending against this stuff, but from a attempt perspective, I mean, people are never going to stop trying to get in. So we just have to, again, we have to know ourselves, know our enemy, know that they're never going to stop coming after us. So we just have to never stop trying to stop it. The total cost of ransomware, and this is also being factored into the cost of cyber insurance premiums. So if any of you are like shopping for cyber insurance or already have it or looking at it, there was a couple of years ago, like the cost of cyber insurance was just going straight up, right? It was just insane. As of like last year, the year before, things have started to plateau a little bit on a cost increase perspective, but they're starting from like this high baseline that they got up to, in 2021 and 2022. And that trend is, the reason why it's plateauing is because there are a lot more entrants coming into the cybersecurity or the cyber insurance market. So there's a lot more companies offering it. There's a lot more carriers that are getting involved. So some of the supply and demand stuff from the market is causing those premium increases to level off a little bit. They're also getting a lot more data, a lot more information from a risk standpoint. So they can say, okay, a customer that has like these 6 tools in place is 70% less likely to experience a breach. Therefore they can charge less premiums, and kind of the market does its magic in making the premiums stay where they are. But again, they got to keep up with all of the latest tactics that the cyber attackers are using. They've got to be able to negotiate with them. So cyber insurance is still costly, and they've got to factor it into both CFOs have to factor it in to their business operational planning, but cyber insurers have to think about it as well.
Patrick, on that note, Eric had a question. How do you help clients, or if you do at all, prepare for cyber insurance testing?
Yeah, so we can, so if you're an Arctic Wolf customer, so we walk through with you, and these can be periodic, like monthly or every couple of weeks. We call them security posture in-depth reviews. So essentially, if you sign up with Arctic Wolf as a customer, you're going to have a named team, and these are the same people that are responsible for your account that are going to be working with you, every step of the way. I actually have a slide on this that I can go through here. So good question, very timely. So this is the Arctic Wolf security journey.
Might be planted, I don't know.
I promise you that wasn't a planted question. So we call it the security journey, right? So this takes you from where you are today when you sign up as a customer for Arctic Wolf, and you have your concierge security team, that name team that I mentioned. We can help you get compliant. We can help you identify those blind spots in your environment, help you configure it to industry standard best practices, and we can focus on kind of whatever is top of mind for you at that particular time, right? Like we have suggestions that hey, we've seen these couple things that maybe you should improve upon or at least start thinking about, and we can kind of work with you, and we walk through you. You share the screen, you're working with us, you're kind of walking through the configurations of all this stuff, making sure that you're getting all the boxes checked, doing everything right. And this is an ongoing journey, right? Because you're never going to be perfect, right? I don't think there's a single organization out there, no matter how big you are, no matter how small you are, that has no security risks, right? That's just the balance between productivity and security. But getting to the optimal point where you have, good user productivity, you're not disrupting anybody's business, but you're also, operating at kind of the right security level. That's kind of where we want to get you from this security journey standpoint. And Arctic Wolf is a managed detection and response company. Kind of a managed security operations center. So we have eyes on glass 24/7. We've got hundreds of people in our SOCs around the world, and they're experts. They're fully trained and certified. And from a triage perspective, we have people that are looking at stuff that can help if incidents are actively happening. They'll call you, help you work with it. They can remediate on their own in some cases. Like if it's after hours and you want us to take care of it, we can do that for you, or we can call you, get you involved. And then kind of the second half of that, when you look at the active triage and response, then you have this concierge, which is the security journey that kind of takes you to a new and higher plane of security effectiveness.
On the the concierge security team. So we're required to work with the FedRAMP compliance, all those policies and security frameworks. I guess, within the concierge security teams at our field, do you have like some teams that specialize in federal contracting and those compliance requirements, and others that are more commercial or things like that, or are all the teams equally as qualified on different stuff?
Yeah, so we'll assign the concierge security team kind of based on the needs and the skill sets of the people that we have, because obviously with 600 something SOC engineers, there's going to be kind of skill set differentials with all of them. So let's say there's a specific compliance goal that you need to meet. Now I do want to just caveat this, that Arctic Wolf at this point is not in FedRAMP, so like we don't have federal government customers at this point, but for other like compliance purposes and things like that, like HIPAA, CMMC, stuff like that, like we have people that if that applies to you for your specific industry, like whether you're in financial, healthcare, manufacturing, what have you, anything that might apply to you, we'll assign that concierge security team to you with experts who are familiar and understand your industry and can help you get there.
Right.
So yes. And this is a name team, so these people will be consistent over, kind of your contract with Arctic Wolf. And then just from a, recommendation perspective of things that you can start doing today to, make sure that you're at least doing some of the basics to take control of your cybersecurity posture. So number one, you have to develop an understanding of what your attack surface looks like. And this is really about kind of taking a step back and understanding all of the points of vulnerability that you might have in your environment. Now this could be public-facing servers. This could be usually end users are probably the number one source of breaches into an environment. So you got to make sure that your end users are doing the right things. You got to make sure they're properly trained. You have to make sure their devices are locked down enough so that they're not like a sitting duck from a device perspective. And you kind of have to put yourself in the shoes of your kid or just somebody who's not tech savvy. Just like what could they click on? What could they do to cause a breach of the environment? Just kind of put yourself in those shoes to develop like where you might be vulnerable. And that's not easy, right? Because most IT environments are super complex. Like there's a lot of servers, there's a lot of devices, there's a lot of users, there's a lot of tools and stuff out there. There's databases, what has access to this database? Should it have access? All of those things. But understanding is, the key to everything there. And then once you kind of understand what you have, you want to make sure you have broad visibility into it. So from a monitoring perspective, like are you looking at the network traffic? Are you collecting those logs from various sources together? Is there any way to correlate that stuff? And that's really like kind of what that SIM conversation was earlier, right? Looking at having visibility into it, correlating all that stuff, and that's hard to do. It's not easy when you start kind of adding a bunch of stuff in the environment, adding users, adding infrastructure. It becomes difficult because the complexity scales exponentially up, right? So having 10 servers to protect is exponentially easier than having 100 servers to protect. Exponentially easier than having 1,000 servers to protect. So the complexity scales up very, very quickly with this. So visibility, and this is kind of where Arctic Wolf comes in, because if you're kind of in that state where hey, we realize that we're not going to be able to do this ourselves. This is something we need to bring in the experts for. We can help you get there without making a big investment in trying to build your own SOC, trying to buy all these tools. Because the reality is that just to buy like the SIM, the software alone, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's not cheap, because then you have to also hire people to manage it. You have to kind of maintain it, and it adds a lot of cost very quickly. And that's something that we can do for you at a much lower price point. Identity controls. So make sure that you're doing your multi-factor authentication. Make sure that there's a way to verify the people who are logging in are who they say they are, and just being very strong from an identity perspective. Because a lot of it's hard for me to believe, just kind of having used my Arctic Wolf system for so long, you go to customers and they're like, yeah, we just enter our 6-character password and we're in. It's like, okay, good luck. So zero trust security strategy, I mentioned this briefly, but this is really giving people access like on a need to know basis, need to access basis. So you're locking down your application so that people aren't able to log in if they shouldn't be able to, that they don't even have access, sometimes even on the network to things that they're not supposed to have access to. That way, if like their machine gets compromised, then they're not able to spread out throughout the entire network and gain access to everything or potentially encrypt all of the data, create that ransomware type of a situation. So zero trust is very important. I do want a quick show of hands. Anyone using zero trust today or thinking about it? Okay, a few of you. So it's good. There's a number of vendors who do this. Like we don't sell that directly, but a lot of good vendors out there who do that. Take control of your cloud infrastructure. So a lot of companies, especially kind of in our target market, are deciding that they don't want to be in like the data center business. They don't want to run servers on-prem, right? It doesn't make sense. So what they've done is they've kind of moved a lot of their stuff out to AWS or to Azure, Google Cloud. They're using a lot of software as a service tools. But at the same time, that opens up a lot of different places for attackers to get into, right? So cloud security posture management is big, making sure that you got it locked down appropriately. And you log into like AWS and some of these systems from a security perspective, it's not a joke, right? Like you look at some of those security policies, it's kind of hard to figure out. And you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of all the things that are out there, which are substantial. Like there's a lot of good controls you can put in there, but if you can't figure out how to configure it, then it doesn't really matter. So you just got to make sure that your developers, I've seen a lot of stories with developers, like they're building an application, something's not working. So what they do is they just go into the like AWS security settings and they just say, hello,
Open up.
Yeah, open it up. And then they never close it. And a lot of times hackers will use that to get in because, the developers just got lazy and didn't think about it.
Patrick, know your audience, so there's a lot of developers here.
Oh, okay. So sorry. No offense to any developers here. But you know what you do. But you know what you do.
Which reminds me. Chuck runs.
All right. Developers are great. Developers are great. For our business. No, I'm just kidding. And then, culture of security. So this is about training. This is just about that kind of ongoing. You don't want people to get lax. And this is just a, cultural thing from a leadership perspective. You want to always make sure that you're not being loosey-goosey about security. Like, this whatever, this is annoying. It might be annoying. We're going to live in the real world here. Some of this stuff might be annoying to have to use multi-factor authentication and do some of these other things. But at the same time, it's better than getting taken down for 4 weeks because you got a ransomware attack, right? I mean, it kind of is what it is. Take the extra 30 seconds and establish that culture of security. Make sure people are aware of what kind of phishing stuff is out there. Make sure they're aware of like malware and all that.
Every now and then we use like the fake phishing tools off 365 and send it out.
Yeah.
And we catch 2 or 3 people every single time.
Yeah.
We have to go through training or something.
Exactly. Yeah, so if
You know who you are, Rachel.
so yeah.
I feel like we're being attacked.
It's actually interesting. So we have data on this. So we have, for our customer base, which is like 6,500 customers, we've got data that shows customers who use some sort of training system have like a 36% less, they're 36% less likely to have a breach because they're actually training their users and can start creating that culture. So this is real. I mean, this is, you might think this is kind of soft and a joke, but it's 36% is a big deal from that standpoint.
Yeah.
All right. Then just a little bit about cyber insurance before I wrap up here. So most of you have cyber insurance. Most companies are either have it or are planning to have it. Very few are not really considering it. I have talked to a few customers who are like, we're just going to self-insure. Like they just kind of have this money in reserve that they've decided from their risk profile that they can do that. But most people want some sort of cyber insurance, just, you know, even for just the negotiation, right, with these ransomware groups. And then from a concern perspective of the respondents, 53 are most concerned with like rising premiums and the stricter requirements for maintaining the coverage, right? Because the list grows every year of requirements that cyber insurance companies want to see. So like maybe before it was like, you know, hey, you got a firewall, hey, you got some intrusion detection, hey, you got endpoint, boom, you're good to go. It could come into like, hey, do you have firewall, endpoint, intrusion detection? Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have 24/7 monitoring? Are you compliant? You know, yada, 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 right? So you just want to make sure that you're staying on top, and you can work with your broker on, you know, kind of figuring out what that is. But what we have seen is that going with MDR, which is, you know, kind of what we provide, can result in up to like a 15%, 10 to 15% discount on those premiums. So in some cases, those premiums are so high that just the reduction in premium you get from going with like an MDR service can cover the whole cost of the MDR service, just the reduction in the premiums. So just something to think about from a cyber insurance perspective there. So with that, I think we're right at 1 o'clock here. So that's all I've got from a content perspective. I do want to open it up for questions. If you want to know anything about cyber, what I'm seeing in the market, what's hot, what's new.
Yeah, I was going to ask, you kind of answered it a little bit on the last slide. Do you see a corollary or balancing effect between the insurance companies having more requirements and maybe premiums coming down? Do you see a correlation effect that, you know, would make it worth it?
Yeah, I think there definitely is a cyber insurance is maturing as a market. It was kind of the Wild West, like when it first started, like maybe in the late 2000s, it was really only like big financial services companies and like maybe big healthcare companies that cyber insurance was kind of targeted towards. So it was kind of it was more or less a niche product, kind of when it first started. But over the past 10 years, you know, it's gained, as attacks have gotten worse and gotten more frequent, you know, cyber insurance companies started to, you know, want to sell it to everybody to fill those gaps, you know, to make money for themselves and, you know, also to establish themselves in the market. But it took a while for like the actuarial tables to kind of become a little bit more well-defined on that stuff. And then once they started collecting, like, let's say 5 years worth of data on a big, like after COVID is when cyber insurance really started to explode. So they started signing up a ton more customers. And by signing up a ton more customers, they got a ton more data on, number one, what kind of tools and protections that their customers had in place. And then they could compare that to how often they got attacked, how often they actually had to pay out. So over time, what they've done is they've developed this list. It's like, okay, best practice, like our customers who have these 8 tools in place, these 8 protections, you know, they are 60% less likely to get a breach than if they don't have these, right? So yes, that's part of the, you know, kind of the premium plateau that we've seen over the past couple of years is because they've started to, you know, the market's kind of starting to come into balance a little bit more.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. I don't have any other questions on the line.
Awesome. Well, yeah, appreciate everybody coming out. Obviously, Arctic Wolf is happy to have a follow-up discussion with anybody here. And, you know, if you're interested in diving deeper, or trying to, you know, customize some stuff around your environment, any specific questions like that, we're happy to hook up with you and do that. But really appreciate y'all coming out today.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you.